or tiers of support. Tiers of support that have a foundation for all students. So every student in this district, we want to make sure that we have expectations in all of our schools and all of the areas of those schools, a focus on teaching social emotional skills to all students, and really focusing on the competencies for social emotional learning. Also reinforcing pro-social behaviors that we want to see. We want to make sure that we acknowledge those, that we're very specific in our praise when we address student behavior. If we're seeing things we want to see and that we want, the pro-social behaviors that we want to see, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging those behaviors in our students. And then when we have problematic behaviors pop up, we want to have, we want that to be flowed out to where it's a very simple system that students understand how are we going to be responding to problematic behavior. And then there's some consistency across the school bands. Discipline flow charts help with that, that really have predictable, safe, and consistent responses to problematic behavior. And that we're data driven. We need to be looking at data, making decisions using data, and then up the continuum. So that would be, this continuum is the foundation, is what we do for all students. The second layer to that is some students are going to need more than that base level and that foundational universal level of support. What is offered to some students in Tier 2, as we identify need, we would offer evidence-based interventions, and those could be things like check-in, check-out, which is a form of mentorship, or some sort of break system if students need to process and have some time, or if we need to have some behavior contracting where we are working with the family, in collaboration with the family and the student, to come to some agreements of what type of behavior is expected, and then what type of supports and agreements can we come to working together. Even with some of those plans and those interventions, students may need more support even than that. And as we move up this continuum, we will need to be very individualized. And so we might need to offer some individualized resources. We may need to put in place some brief counseling, where maybe 2 or 3 counseling sessions of individual counseling sessions, whether it be with a school counselor or even with a mental health counselor. Up that continuum can also be something like a functional behavioral assessment, where we're looking at what is the function of this behavior. Is this a avoidance behavior, or are they trying to obtain attention? And then we would write a BIP, which is a behavioral intervention plan, that says, okay, so if we want to have some desired behaviors, then we need to replace some of the behaviors that are not desirable. And so what does that look like, and how can we create a plan with the student and for the student? We may need to coordinate care in this third tier of support. And we may get to a place where we just can't do it alone. We can't rely on the own resources that we have here in our district, and we need to reach out to our community and partner with our community and have easy access that families and students can benefit from those outside services. So we need to know what they are, how to plug students and families in, and then how to really encourage and continue to be in communication with those agencies.
So Omar expressed that we do look at data when we're thinking about how are we doing with our PBIS and social emotional learning in the district. So we've highlighted for you here a couple of pieces of data that we look at. And I was remiss in saying I sure appreciate the time that the board is giving us to present this information. We're just both really excited and happy to be here, by the way. So when we look at this, one of the pieces of data that we spend some time with in every building and then at the district level is the tiered fidelity inventory, or the TFI data. And so this is a self-reflection that each school does, where they take a look at how do we think we are doing in terms of fidelity to the PBIS system, those tiers that Omar referenced before. And then that gives us some really good and specific data for school buildings and then also for the district in terms of how we're doing. And what you see in front of you is the district PBIS implementation according to the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI. So the chart in front of you represents the overall full fidelity in all of our tiers. So you can see we started in 2016-17 at about 19%, and we've moved from there to 2020, 2021 to about 38%. So that's good growth, but it is something where we would like to continue to grow, and we'd like to see more growth in that area. But again, keep in mind that this represents all tiers. So when schools do the tiered fidelity inventory, they're really critiquing themselves on how are we doing in all three tier areas. Omar's slides are going to show us some of the strengths of the system that we really do have in place. And then also, one thing that I realized as a building principal was the more I did the TFI and understood the question, and the more I understood the tiered system, the more likely I was to be more critical on myself and my school on how we were doing. And so that's something to keep in mind as we look at this data, is that as you begin to understand what the fidelity inventory is asking, you really then become able to critique yourself better. So that's something we want to make sure we mention as well. The other piece I think here is the second bullet, are the universal screening data. And so we've got a couple of those listed there for you. And what this gives us is specific student needs. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. So,
yeah, and another thing just to add is really we're answering the question, like, how do you know, right? How do you know? You can say you're implementing PBIS, that you're implementing this framework or this system. Well, how do you know? Well, you know by measurement. And so you have to have tools to be able to measure. And then how do you know what students are dealing with? And so the universal screening processes help us with that. So looking at, that last table showed all three tiers. If we were to break that down into just tier one, so we had close to 50% implementation back when we just started, back in 2016-17. And we have been building up. And then you can see on both tables, 2019, 2020, right, COVID, we didn't do any assessment that year. We didn't do, we weren't able to train how we would want to train or coach how we would like to coach. And so we had a big zero. We weren't able to gather data for the year that we were out for COVID. And then you can also see that we've dipped a little bit in our implementation, and there's been some things that we've struggled with as a district, staffing issues that may have made it hard to continue with training and coaching opportunities, and so we have seen a little slip or a dip in our implementation data for tier one. In regard to tier two, we've been just kind of over 60% as we started building into that second tier of support. And then we had that growth in 2018-19 was our first kind of year that we were really intentionally, kind of what Casey had said, where we become more critical. Well, are we actually monitoring our interventions? Are we actually implementing them with fidelity? And so we saw that kind of like that small drop, and we're just kind of hovering around that 60% implementation rate. And we have not had all schools, they've gone through tier two training, but we haven't had a lot of coaching that's been offered this year for that second tier of support. And we have not moved into tier three implementation at all. So we have not trained to tier three, nor have we coached for tier three. In regard to the SEL screening data, we administer in the elementary. It is a tool that is called the SRSS-IE, and that social emotional learning universal screening tool screens for internalizing and externalizing problems. So an example of that, right, is when we look at like behavior problems or aggression, we would look at like aggression, and that would be an externalizing problem. An internalizing problem may be something like being shy or withdrawn. What we found as kids came back, as students came back from COVID, and we every one of our elementary schools administered the SRSS-IE, what we found was a lot of what we kind of had thought, right? Is that students would come back with kind of low academic, or we had some concerns around low academic performance. They had lost some learning. Also, that screener picked up that we have had some behavior problems. And so some students had been out and kind of that transition back to school. It was hard to follow the expectations, and the routines and procedures of the school. And we noticed that students came back and they're a little more shy and withdrawn. I also wonder if like masks have contributed to some of that shy or withdrawn. Not being able to see everyone's full face, can have some breakdowns in communication, and I think teachers kind of picked up on students being a little bit more shy as they came back from COVID. And then we also administer student needs assessment for secondary.
So as we look at that, this is for the 6th through 12th grade students. And so this was a survey that students took themselves again, and you can see there the areas that really produced the largest results of what kids are saying they need, what they want to be successful in school. And so as we look at this, the first one there is lack of basic supplies, and I think the district took great strides to try to make sure that we even the playing field in that and made sure that those supplies were there for kids. So I think we've done a good job of trying to work on that particular piece. The second one, of course, peer pressure. I think all adolescents, it's the adolescent experience that we all go through. There's peer pressure. The other 4, as we look at them, though, I think really have a lot to do with and bear out the research that is beginning to come out regarding children, adolescents, and the pandemic. And so what we are seeing there is, this is always true, I think, for the adolescent years. That's pretty clear in research. But we are seeing stress, anxiety, grief, and depression in higher levels for some of our kiddos at those secondary schools. And so, we will discuss as we move through the process some of the things that we are doing to respond to that. But I think this really does bear out some of the early research that we're seeing regarding how kids are responding to the pandemic.
Yeah, and one thing that is a little bit different between the 2 screeners for right now for elementary, that is a teacher screener, and so teachers are going through and rating students, whereas the 6th through 12th grade, this is a student screener, and so students have the ability to fill out and say, I need help with stress, I need help with anxiety, these were the areas that as we screen for a need, then we try to fill that need and offer support.
Omar, the question was, how many 6th to 12th grade students took the survey?
We had, oh man, I don't have the raw data. I wish Shelby was on with us. I know that it was administered at all the schools, and I think that we were shooting for at least 50% of the school population for it to be a valid. I can get back to you on that. I don't have the raw data in front of me. Like I said, Shelby was great at providing the data once it came in for us. So we can get that back to you.
I've got it written down. We'll make sure we get that information to you.
Okay, and then also in regard to student discipline, there is definitely systemic changes. We are definitely moving away from punitive measures as our only response to student discipline to a more restorative response. We're really hoping to leverage behavior change based on relationships, strong, meaningful, deep relationships with our students that we can establish with our students, rather than exclusion, right? And saying, we see problematic behavior arise and our one response is just exclusionary discipline. There's a lot of research around, the school to prison pipeline and how schools have contributed and their practices have contributed to that, and how, when you have exclusionary measures put in place as your sole response, we see increases of that aggression, or we see increases of student non-attendance, right? The more you're out, the less likely you are to come back. And so we really want to put in place a real preventative and instructive and restorative model. We're working with students, alongside students, and having them be part of that discipline process. Also, we have a policy revision that we are right in the middle of, and Casey can give you a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, so I think Omar is right. We are really seeing folks moving towards a more restorative practice, and that really came to fruition when we were working with the committee on the policy revision. And so, of course, we take guidance from Wasa, and it was interesting because when I started, back in the dark ages 20 years ago, we had a matrix really for if you did this, then this was the punishment you received. And it's interesting, Wasa is recommending that, and OSPI as well, that we go back to a matrix. And when we presented that to the committee as we looked at this policy revision, the committee really was kind of upset about that. They didn't want us to do that. They were concerned about a matrix, and folks really wanted to be in a place where they could respond to discipline in a way that was more restorative. And that came out, I think, really clearly in the committee work that we did with folks. And so as we look at the matrix, though, from WASDA and the state, as we look to implement that, it isn't the old-fashioned, if you do this, then you get this. It really does call for us to look for other methods, to start at the lowest level possible, and provides a lot of leeway for school staff, administrators, teachers to figure out ways to build relationships with kids, teach kids appropriate behavior. And so as you see that policy revision coming to you, you will notice that there is a matrix, but it really is intended on how do we build relationships, and when appropriate, when do we reteach those skills, and how do we do that, and how do we keep things at the lowest level. And so it was really interesting, though, to see that folks don't want to go back to the way things were. Folks wanted to really maintain this idea of, restorative justice for kids. So pretty exciting work we've been doing with some of the committee.
Yeah, and it's something I'm just really, I know Casey mentioned it, but we're just very proud that we're a district that is really wanting to work with our students and with our families through that discipline process, because we do truly want students to learn in that process rather than to be punished in that. And so when we do look at, when we have to use exclusionary discipline, what is our data showing us, and what does that data look like? And so we've seen that we've hovered around 7%, anywhere from 6 to 7% historically. So this is kind of an 8-year trend data, and you can see the 2021 data when we were out, for COVID, when students were out. You can see that we were, there wasn't much student discipline at all. And so there's a 0.1%. But from 2014 through, kind of the 2018-19 school year, we were about 6 to 7%. 2019-20, you do see a drop. Partially, that contribute. That low number is we were out in March of of that year, and then this year we're trending right around 3.4%. And so, in looking at how we respond, you guys also received in your board docs if I were to look at our last kind of what quote unquote normal year, and then how we are trending against that year this year, you can see that our discipline numbers are down. And I think our schools, our staff are working really hard to keep kids in school, really hard to teachers are doing an amazing job in the classroom, working with students, wanting them to be there, understanding how valuable that time that they have together is, like focusing on strong relationships. And so our discipline numbers are down. I don't know if this is, I feel like we're creating a new baseline coming back. I don't know. I'm not positive that every year will look the same. I really do believe coming back from from being out, that we're kind of in some new territory. And so, we are seeing low discipline numbers, just kind of at this time, as far as exclusion goes. And so I think our schools are really trying everything that they can do to keep kids in school and to work with students, and make sure that kind of supportive measures are in place.
The question, Omar, was, can you define excluded? Does it mean expelled for one or more days?
Yeah, so exclusion would be, anytime missed for disciplinary action. So it would be exclusions, expulsions, and suspensions. So whether that be long-term or short-term suspensions, or even in-school suspensions. And moving into kind of the final area of guidance and counseling. We do have House Bill 5030 that you guys have probably heard about, and Casey will give you just a little bit of information about that, and then I'll cover an update for YSD staffing.
So House Bill 5030 requires districts to create a district comprehensive school counseling plan, or as we like acronyms, it is a CSCP, the District Comprehensive School Counseling Plan, and that must address students' social, emotional, academic, and career development needs. It generally is in alignment, the law is generally in alignment with the recommendations from the American School Counselors Association model for how schools should be run. And it does, as with many things, it starts with the district self-assessment. And so that's something we'll be working on with a committee of counselors this coming summer. There is a 3-year timeline with the Comprehensive School Counseling Program, and it is in 22, we need to, by the time we start next school year, we need to develop and adopt a transition plan. And so we'll be coming to the school board with a transitional plan. In 22-23 school year, we need to use the plan and begin to develop and work on the comprehensive school counseling program or plan. And then in 23-24, we really need to have full implementation of the plan. And so, as I said, it is, if you're familiar with the American School Counselors Association, it is close to the ASCA model. There are some differences, but it really does require us to have counselors spend most of their time doing what you see in the picture, working with kids and spending the greatest majority of their time doing that.
And I'm really proud that we were able to increase counseling services coming into this year. We added 8 new counselor positions in our district. And so that was I feel like a huge celebration and win for our students and for our schools and for our counseling staff that have been working very hard. So we were able to add 8 new counseling positions this last year. And we also have 3 counseling interns that are serving. Go ahead.
I was going to say, before we move off this slide, I thought you were going to move off the slide. There was the question, is House Bill a funded mandate and state funded mandate? I've read it several times over the last several months since I started this position, and I would say no, it is not. It is something we're required to do, but it's very similar to the school improvement process in design, I would say.
And so increasing counseling staff and was a big move this year. I'm so glad we did that. We're better, prepared. Our schools were better prepared to serve student needs. And we also have other social emotional support and staff that are working in our schools. And so we also have 3 social emotional specialists in our district. And we have 2 social workers one at Davis, one at Eisenhower. We do have 15 behavior and MPSS interventionists. We're going to be behavior specialists coming soon, that they are all throughout our our elementary schools, and then 2 that are spread across our middle schools, but those will be increasing to have 1 at every school. ESD 105, we collaborate with ESD 105. We have gang interventionists that are providing some support for 6th graders in our district, student assistance professionals, or SAPs, that are addressing substance abuse issues. We have ed advocates in our district that are helping with things like transitioning students from juvenile detention back into our school system. We participate in a grant and a Project Aware grant that provides mental health counselors. It's been really difficult, to be honest, to find mental health counselors out in that are wanting to work in schools. And so we've had the posting all year long for 2 middle school mental health counselors. And we've been able to fill 1 of those positions, and we've just recently secured the 2nd person. And we've had both postings up, I think, starting in September. So huge need, and it's really difficult to find folks to serve in that capacity. We also offer gaggle therapy, and so if we can't kind of work with a local mental health agency to secure service provision, we can use teletherapy. And we hold a contract with Gaggle. And so there is a great need. There's a lot of confusion whether or not it's an access issue, or if it's an engagement issue, or if we have, the right type of mental health counselors in this community that serve this community. And so there's been a lot of talk just about how to offer the most effective mental health support. We have a great relationship with Comprehensive Mental Health. They actually provide a liaison to every one of our schools. And so we have a mental health liaison. And so if we want to get care established, we have a liaison assigned to every school to have direct access to comprehensive mental health. We also have community in schools, and there are 5 schools that are participating in community in schools that have case management. And then, of course, we have the Davis Health Clinic and their behavioral health consultants, or BHCs, that are supporting students' mental health there at the Davis Health Clinic. And so there's a lot of supports in place serving students, and we are really proud of that. And coming back from having students out, they've expressed need, and I feel like we've done everything that we can to utilize all these folks, and and have hands out and ears and listening to students. And so it's been really exciting. Are there any questions?
Funding for the 8 additional counselors and all the MTSS people and some of the additional personnel, is any of that linked to ESSER funds, or which are going to go away? Or are all of those going to be sustainable into the future?
So I think Dr. Rodriguez could probably speak to this better than I could, but I think that there's been fine work done between P&L and our department in making sure that those will be sustainable as we move towards the future. And I think that there's been a way to figure out that funding. I don't think I was privy to that directly, but I do believe that those positions will be funded. And then Omar, can you speak to the aid counseling position?
You know,
Omar, I can jump in.
okay.
So Director Walker, great question on sustainability. We certainly don't want to be adding personnel positions without advance notice ahead of time that they are positions that would end with ESSER funding. So the plan is to have those continue, and those are sustainable positions. I will open this up though if anybody has any different understanding of that not being sustainable, because we are working on a model that would allow all of these positions that provide such a vital support for students to be ongoing.
Thank you. And just a comment I'd like to add to kind of, it might partly answer one of Graciella's questions. I know that WASDA, the State School Directors Association, in some of their legislative positions and permanent positions, there has been movement at the state level to increase funding specifically for social emotional learning and for support. So I think that's going to be an ongoing effort that districts across the state recognize that we have kids that are hurting and that we need to better fulfill those needs.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I would also just add, I appreciate Omar, you calling out that we have those counseling positions in place and that we hired them much earlier than districts in the surrounding area across the state. So we were projecting the need for that during the pandemic and committed to counseling being a primary resource to serving our students.
I have a question kind of relating to process, I suppose, more than anything else. If we go back to the slide on tier one of the bullet points was being data driven in our decision making. And I guess my biggest question is, I look at that and I immediately think that, we're waiting a year down the line for bureaucratic reports to tell us where we've been in order to make decisions about the future. And so my question is, are we able to make nimble, proactive, in real time changes with real activity that's happening in our buildings? Maybe that's not the best worded question, but I hope you get my point.
No, I get it. And really, the TFI calls that out. So I should have said this. When we look at, kind of us hovering around that tier one implementation being at 75%, a huge part of that is the fact that we are building up this instantaneous access to usable data. So then we know what is happening in our building, and really what we're trying to, what it specifically calls out is the who, what, when, where around behavior. What is happening, where it's happening. So then you can make some decisions, and typically those decisions are one of two things. You can add, you can change your delivery, right? And we can teach specific skills proactively around specific areas or to address specific problematic behavior that's occurring in the building, or we can change the environment, right? We can add people. We can add, like, if there's something that's consistently happening down a specific hallway in a school, and we can get that information very quickly, then we can, put personnel there and add supervision. And so the data, we've been using SDS, and we've been able to build instantaneous data reports, but we're also looking at Illuminate, which is an amazing platform that allows for that, for us to be very data driven and to have instantaneous access. And it won't be a year, but it is as soon as the last day. So it would be like us looking at data today and making decisions about what data that leading up all the way to kind of yesterday's date.
I would add, Director Beckett, that at the building level, we have the BSET teams that come together and meet about kids and look closely at individual student data as well. And so that could be behavioral data, that could be academic data, and really, bringing those teams of people together to figure out what are we going to do, right away for kids. Because I get what you're saying, I think, which is, gosh, we can't wait down the line to help a kid today. We got to make that happen. And those BSET teams, and which include our counselors, our behavioral specialists, our principals, really are reactive and quick reactive. They're able to respond to those needs on a pretty quick basis. And that is built around everyday student data. So hopefully that's helpful too.
I have a couple of other questions as well. When you talked about student discipline, you talked about I think you said the state maybe was recommending that we go back to a matrix kind of disciplinary system, and that the group that is doing this work really pushed back against that. How are we? And I like that we're having that. Sounds like that's more of a student-centric approach. I think one of the potential outcomes I could see is that we don't maybe have a consistent implementation or a consistent delivery of discipline. So how are we ensuring that we build in some kind of consistency in how we deliver discipline? And I think the second part of my question maybe is could answer that question, and that's around the data systems that you all are using. And thinking back to the equity audit, one of the outcomes of that is that we needed stronger data systems around discipline, and particularly I think around measuring ethnicity and discipline, if I'm remembering that correctly. So how are we ensuring that we are not having adverse impact on certain groups?
Yeah, thank you. You know, one of the so on the front end of that, so our data system and our practices. So as we move back toward a matrix format, and really we're being, you know, we will be moving in this direction. The state is saying that we will move back toward a matrix format. That within that matrix, which is very different, just the look of the matrix reminds, like Casey was saying, he remembers being able to say, here's this offense, here's the predetermined response, or here's a predetermined punishment, right? And so, and then it was kind of progressive in nature. The new matrix is not progressive, is not meant to be progressive in nature. It's only to provide some guidance and that consistency, because what you're calling out is very important. How do we have good calibration? And how do we have good, discretion in our decision making? And that matrix will assist with that to where we can kind of have good calibration for our responses. And biannually, we have our whole district, every building goes through a disparity review to see if we find any disparities within any of the populations. And so we just conducted those reviews. Casey, was it December or January?
It was actually in February. Yep.
February. So in February, and then we will do another review at the end of the year. And so if we find disparities, each one of the buildings in our district will create a plan to address the disparities that we see in that data.
I'm looking at to see if I have any other questions. I think those were all of my questions, but just want to thank you for your presentation. It's good to hear how these the various programs we have throughout the district are working, in particular PBIS. We know that it's provides such strong supports to our students. So I appreciate your presentation and all the work that the district is doing to implement the program. And also want to thank you for being intentional about defining acronyms. Even though I've been on the board for 10 years, I will never remember acronyms. So I appreciate that you've defined those for us. So thank you, Omar and Casey, for your time and putting this presentation together, and to all of the staff that are doing this work as well. I know that it, again, provides such strong supports to our students. Any other comments or questions from board members?
Just to thank you for an informative presentation, and I'm encouraged by the fact that we do need to have consistent and fair discipline, but we can't punish our way to success. And I really agree that we need the idea of teaching the behaviors we want, and restorative practices go a long way to have a full kind of a full quiver of arrows to attack discipline issues. And I do have one question along that line. When we talk about training and restorative practices, which sometimes kind of gets a dirty name in the press, are we training our parapros and our bus drivers and our kitchen staff on some of those concepts and strategies of restorative practices? Because sometimes they're sort of the first contact for kids. So where are we with training of those folks?
So we have offered multiple trainings throughout the year since we've been implementing PBIS in our district, and we've offered. Training has been very difficult. This year in particular, we've had a lot of staffing issues, but we have not had an opportunity to offer a lot of restorative practices training this year. But that is something that we would, PBIS really provides the structure or the skeleton, and restorative practices, social emotional learning is like the meat on the bones, right? And that's something that we have to continuously train all staff, and it is really all staff. So thank you for calling that out.
I would add, Director Walker, that we are working with our PBIS companies to create work videos that are requested by our MTSS specialists to be able to present those to folks in a short format. They'll be able to see some of these practices and work from coaches in a timely manner that kind of is on the spot as needed. So we've got some work thanks to our MTSS folks that's happening in that direction as well. So to provide to parapros specifically.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the next agenda item, and that is items of board interest. Do any board members have items of board interest they'd like to share?
Not at this time. Thank you.
So a couple of a reminder and a question. The NALEO conference is coming up at the end of June in Chicago. And just putting that out there, we've had a board member or two attend that conference. So if that's something that you're interested in, please talk to Barb for registration, and we'll need to put that on a board meeting for approval. I think, is that the right process? Does the board need to approve the travel? Yeah. And there's a link in the public content. So if you want to learn more about the NALEO conference, you can click on the link and learn more information there. And then we are would like to schedule our summer board retreat. We had originally scheduled that for August 15th, and a couple of board members were not available on that date. And so we're looking at retreat dates of either July 22nd or August 8th. So if you can look at your calendars and see if either of those days fit. July 22nd or August 8th. And the retreat is generally a full day activity.
Either of those days works for me.
I can make either work.
Okay. Right. So I think we will follow up with Board Director Navarre to get his availability and get that on the books. Next is the superintendent's update. Superintendent Green.
Thank you so much. I have 3 items to share with you this week, and I thank Dennis Mattson for changing his schedule this afternoon to allow himself to be present for the first item, which is the Sunnyside YV Tech facility, which I believe Barb has just put up on the screen. And what I have here is a memo, which was from mid-March, and I simply want to inform the board that we are turning the facility over and Sunnyside over to the Sunnyside School District. So there has been quite a lot of back work that has happened, and we're not able to sustain the satellite facility at Sunnyside. So the work of a legislator to make it return to Sunnyside is been deemed the most relevant choice at this time. So I would invite Dennis Mattson to come on and share just a bit more information about that Sunnyside transfer.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, this is something that's been in the works since I've been here over the last 4 years. When this facility was originally designed, it was designed as what is called a branch campus. And so I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. A branch campus is one where it's got a host district, such as it has 3 or more programs, where a satellite is 2 or less. And so when this facility was designed, the intent was that this would become a branch campus hosted by the Yakima or by the Sunnyside School District. And over the course of time, that has not transpired. And so we've tried a number of different things to help that facility and try to make it successful, from running PM programs to running cosmetology programs. And so none of that has transpired. The most students we had in that building at any one time was 88 students. And that's where we ran 2 programs, a welding and a nursing program. But over the last 4 years, we've seen that enrollment continue to decline. Currently, the last 3 years, we've only been able to run a half-time welding program. And so we have about 24 students in that, and that's a PM program only. And then nursing this year, we tried to run it again as an AM and a PM session. We're sitting with about 24 students in that program. And so what we've seen is a continued decline in enrollment. And having come from Walla Walla, which is a similar district, we were a branch campus there out of the Tri-Tech Skills Center. The only way that we could make that program successful, and we knew that when we walked in, is that the host district, i.e. Walla Walla, was going to have to provide 90 to 95% of the student base. And that's what's happening over there right now. They have 180 to 190 students. 90% of them come from the host district. And Sunnyside has not been able to do that. Conversations with Kevin McKay, who was there prior, and now with Heidi, they're not willing to take that on as a branch campus. For us just to operate that building with no students in it is about $120,000 a year. When you start adding salaries for teachers on there, we're not being fiscally responsible to the consortium as far as the funding it goes. And so that's been a big challenge for us. And we would have to even maybe break even in that building, you would have to have 144 students full-time, 3 full-time staff members, a secretary, and a principal. Currently, what we're operating that building is a teacher and a half with no secretarial support and no administrative support. And one of my concerns when I first talked to Sunnyside was, in our consortium actually, was where's the supervision? I mean, we're setting out there without a full-time principal in that building, and that's a risk for the consortium as far as, supervisory capacity and everything. And the commitment from the consortium, or the conversation with the consortium, was to continue to operate that and have it be successful as a satellite certainly isn't there. And if Sunnyside's not willing to take it on as a branch campus, our best option would be to go ahead and discontinue operating at that location. And the way the WAC reads is that the building, whatever district it resides in, goes to that district. So that's why that building would be turned over to Sunnyside, because it lies within their district.
And Dennis, yeah, could you just remind us, or maybe for the first time, share with the board the cost to build the facility to the Yakima School District? Because if I'm correct, it did not cost us anything.
It did not cost us a dime. No, it was $6 million, I believe, and that was all through state dollars for skill centers. And that was through Senator Honeyford, was who promoted that, and then the superintendent at that time, and I forget who it was down there in Sunnyside, but that was through them. So any investment we've had in there, we do have some nursing equipment that is ours, but as it says in the memo, anything that is Yakima School District property will come back to us. Anything that Sunnyside put in there would go back to them. And then it's just a matter of working with our consortium on if there is minimal supplies or equipment left in there, what we would do with that. So right now, Yakima and Sunnyside have agreed as the superintendents and through our subcommittee that our best option is to close that. My next thing would be to present it to the consortium superintendents for a vote. And I would think that's going to pass the resolution without any issue whatsoever.
And then the last thing I would add is that Senator Honeyford, who is instrumental in securing the facility, is also in supportive of turning it over to the Sunnyside School District at this point. In fact, it was he who reached out to me and to Dennis to start the process, recognizing that it was the model that we were trying to, or that he was trying to establish and that we were in support of, was not coming to fruition. Are there any questions of the board regarding the Sunnyside YV Tech facility or any related matter?
Any questions from board members? If you have a question, so certainly understand the reasoning for closing the site. Are we able to provide opportunity for the students who are currently being served by that facility to receive education in Yakima?
Yeah, we will be able to. What we're going to do is we're going to move the nursing program up to here because I do need a second instructor. So we will move that up. The students that attend that facility do have the opportunity to come to YV Tech. Our one challenge is, and I mentioned it at the last board meeting that I was at, we want to start an advanced manufacturing program for welding. That's the one option that we don't have here at the Skills Center. Is a good welding program. That's something we're working on. So all the students that do attend that would be able to come to YV Tech outside if they want welding, but we do have some other programs out here such as automation and some other programs I believe those students would be able to go to.
Are we able to provide transportation to those students? Or will they have
the school districts provide transportation. And so Sunnyside has a bus come up here. Granger has their bus, and that's the two schools that support it the most. One of the things, and I'm just going to backtrack a little bit, I think when they thought of putting this program in, again, I said the host district of that would really have to support it. When you look at our consortium, we have 15 high schools. 13 of them are on this side of Sunnyside. SELA's not going to transport kids down there. We as Sunnyside, or as Yakima, we have the programs here for us to transport back. It's just the philosophy of it and just understanding not having to run a smaller skills center. Those are some of the challenges, and it's overwhelming. And Sunnyside right now does have declining enrollment. They have to do. So for them to support it, it just doesn't make sense either.
If there are no further questions regarding Sunnyside YV Tech, I would give my extreme gratitude to Principal Mattson for being a part of this session tonight and providing such clarity around the facility. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
All right. I'll move on with the other two items. One is that the Wasa Awards on May 3rd. You may recall that I requested from the board a commitment to either be in person or virtual for the Wasa. We had committed to being there virtually. However, declining commitment or enrollment from other districts has led to the cancellation of the Wasa Awards ceremony this year. So we will find a way to recognize those that fall within our own district, most likely at a board meeting or some other meeting. So I wanted to notify you all as members that that would be happening or would not be happening. And lastly, you can see, thank you, Barb. We have this wonderful tech display here for the EIE Awards, the Excellence in Education, which will be held April 29th at Eisenhower from 6 to 8:30 p.m. We're excited. I don't know if we have, let me see who's on here. I'll just go ahead and do this myself here. So the Excellence in Education Award, we typically had the celebration that would happen separately with the acknowledgement of our certified staff and our classified staff. We are combining these into one celebration, and then also involving the Yakima Schools Foundation. So we're excited about them being the lead sponsor. I shouldn't say including, they're really hosting the event, and they're the catalyst behind it. So we're excited about this growing into even more of a celebration than it was previously, and involving much more of our community in the process. We are having this at Eisenhower this first year, and we'll assess and see how that that goes. But I would encourage board members, if you're interested in attending, to please let us know so that we could send out notification if others would like to be there. It is a community event, so we're excited that so many people will have access. Can I entertain any questions from the board? All right, that concludes the superintendent update. I will hold off on any update on our National Migrant Conference. I would like to actually just get my bearings here. I think I was here about 5 minutes before the meeting started. But I have a great appreciation, as I was sharing with our executive director, Charlotte Ellis, who is here as well, that it kind of gives you a great perspective of what students go through in trying to get to certain locations and all of the challenges that they face. So kudos to Executive Director Charlotte Ellis for creating an environment where we could all get, delayed and then come in late to meetings and finally get to where we need to be to try to meet all of the expectations of the adults around us. So I look forward to the presentation that we will be giving about the conference. I'll just give you a little preview that it was well worth having our team attend and the connections that were made, but more importantly, the opportunity to do what's right by our students and by our community. So please, in an upcoming meeting, expect a report out on that as well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Director Villanueva.
Thank you. Look forward to hearing for that report. Next item on the agenda is approvals. We have an approval to increase the current contract with Maxim Healthcare Staffing, and Dr. Darlene is leading that discussion.
Yes, thank you, Board. We are requesting that the Board of Directors grant permission to increase our current contract with Maxim Healthcare Staffing from $198,000 to $578,000. This additional $380,000 will provide the district classified paraeducators staffing in our special education programs.
Any questions from board members? Okay. I will entertain a motion that the Board of Directors grants approval to increase the current contract with Maxim Healthcare Staffing from $198,000 to $578,000. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Norm.
Second.
Seconded by Ryan. Is there any discussion?
The only thing I'd like to discuss is as we are kind of putting two different worlds together here, as we were talking about YV Tech programs. At one time, there was a paraprofessional training program through YV Tech, I believe, and I don't think that exists anymore. But because of the shortage of trained and skilled paraprofessionals in our district and many districts, and especially those that have the additional in-depth training required to be an effective paraprofessional with special education students, I'm wondering if that's something that we might want to look at as a YV Tech program again and sort of build our own population of well-trained and skilled paraprofessionals. So it's not directly related to this need. This is obviously an immediate need, but I think for long-term care, we might want to think about looking at that again as a possible YV Tech program.
Thanks, Norm. It's always good to be thinking about how to build our talent pipeline. Let's see, so we've had a motion and second we discussed. Is there any other discussion?
I have one further question. I guess the question would just simply be, how often does this contract get elevated, and is this a larger than normal elevation from year to year?
So these type of contracts are an annual contract, and we usually staff them based on our projected needs for that year. This one is larger than normal due to staffing shortages. Usually the amount that we request for the original $198,000, that's a typical amount of request from one year to the next. This one, obviously, we needed to find some more bodies.
Any other questions or comments? Or if you'll conduct a roll call vote, please.
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Walker,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva,
Aye.
President Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a review of board policies. This is part of our policy governance work. We have 4 policies to review. Based on recent discussions, we are encouraging board members to summarize the policy rather than reading the entire policy. We've assigned policy reviews to different board members. Board member Navarro is not here, so I'll ask one of our board members in attendance to take on the 4th policy listed here. We'll start at the top with policy 1000.3.6, board committee principles, and that policy is assigned to Director Beckett.
Thank you, Director Villanueva. I will summarize this 1000.3.6 as board committees, when selected, are advisory in nature. The board may accept or reject all or some of the committee's recommendations. Committee work never supersedes the work or authority of the board, and all requirements of the Open Meetings Act which apply to the work of the board also bind the work of the board committees.
Thank you. Are there any comments or suggestions for changes to this policy? Okay, let's move to the next policy. All of the policies that we review in this section of the agenda under policy governance will send a survey out to board members and tomorrow, and the surveys will be due on April 18th, and they will be reviewed at the April 25th board meeting. Let's move to our second policy, policy 1000.3.1, governing style, and Director Walker, you want to sign that one.
Okay, this is a rather lengthy one. I'll try to shorten it as best I can. But basically, under governing style, the board of directors will govern with an emphasis on outward vision rather than internal preoccupation, encouragement of diversity in viewpoints, strategic leadership rather than administrative detail, clear distinction of board and superintendent roles, compliance with all appropriate district policies and procedures. It's a collective rather than individual decisions, future rather than past or present focused, and proactive rather than reactive. Accordingly, and there are a number of sections here, the board will cultivate a sense of group responsibility, and the board is responsible for excellence in governing. And the board is the initiator of policy. The board uses an agreed upon policy governance model. The board will direct and control and inspire the district through establishment of broad written policies reflecting the board's values and perspectives. Section 4, the board will enforce upon itself whatever discipline is needed to govern with excellence. To ensure that all board meetings are conducted with maximum effectiveness and efficiency, members will do their homework. They will listen with an open mind, avoid surprises, especially with controversial issues, put the team and team goals first, follow board protocols, display good manners, and show respect for one another, and support the majority. Once the board makes a decision, support the decision and work to make it a good one. Do not sabotage the rest of the board. That I think it's important to comment with this one that also it's important to have open and debate among the board. We don't want to participate in groupthink. But however, once we've voted and made a decision, then we will support the actions of the entire board. Number 4.8, do not make snap decisions. Do not take action on non-agenda items brought to the microphone. Discuss issues thoroughly. Avoid side conversations. Do not play to the audience. Support the president's efforts to facilitate an orderly meeting and value equal participation of all members. And I'm going to kind of skip the remaining ones if you want to read those, but I felt that the ones that I covered are the essential the ones, except the very last comment. I think I have not seen any problems with this, but it's just a reminder that the board will observe the confidentiality of closed or executive sessions. Discussions held in executive session are not to be discussed with anyone else other than the board members, the superintendent, or our legal counsel. So that's kind of a quick run through of governing style.
Thank you, Director Walker. Is there any discussion or questions or recommendations for changes on this policy?
I do, Director Villanueva, have some quick comments. I recognize that the board in general is very engaged with policy governance as a whole, and I respect the desire to present a united front and to further the goals of the board as a whole at all times. I respect that completely. I also think it's very important to remember as we look at these policies that the composition of boards changes over time as members come and go, that governance in general is fluid and does ebb and flow with the change of the makeup of the board, and that it's also important to remember that while we want a unified front, that it's unacceptable to put words into members' mouths as we have our meetings, and that individual perspectives should be respected at all times.
Director Beckett, do you have recommendations of changes that you'd like to see in this policy?
I don't have specific changes to this specific policy. I think that if we look at them all from that perspective, we'll probably all be on the same page. I know we all have a lot more in common than we have apart. I just think that it's important to remember that we err on the side of presenting a united front, and yet that doesn't always work with 5 elected people who come together to provide the oversight for the district as a whole, and that individuals need to be respected, just as the decision of the board needs to be respected.
Thanks for your comments. The next agenda for review is the next policy for review is policy 1000.3.7, board committee structure. That is assigned to me. This is one of our shorter policies. A committee is only a committee if the board wishes it into existence, whether the charge comes from the board. Only committees that are formally recognized by the board are actual committees. We have no committees currently in place. Quick review. Any questions or comments on that policy? And our fourth policy for review is policy 1000.4.0, global governance management connection. Can I get a volunteer to review that policy, please?
I can do that. It's pretty short. Essentially, the board's sole official connection to the operational organization, its achievements and conduct, will be through the district's chief executive officer, entitled superintendent. It should be noted that the board operates in a team manner that involves open communication with all members of the superintendent and district management team. This open communication is for informational and relationship building purposes and should not be taken as a means for the board to direct, evaluate, or unduly distract members of the superintendent and district management team.
Thank you, Director Walker. Are there any questions or comments on this policy? Okay, surveys will come out tomorrow, and again, they are due on Monday, April 18th. We have just about a week to complete those surveys, and we will review them at the April 25th board meeting. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Superintendent Green, do we have a need for executive session?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Thank you, everybody. Great meeting, good content, and we will see you next Tuesday. Tuesday at our, I don't have the schedule up, next Tuesday, is that right, Barb?
Correct, and it's at Eisenhower High School in person. And Martha Rice has raised her hand.
Thank you. Director Rice.
She's probably on mute.
Thank you all
There she goes.
thank you all for accommodating me these last few months. And special thanks to Graciela as she's stood in and done actual woman's work facilitating these meetings. It will be a few more weeks before I'm able to fully participate. And I apologize that my camera was off all this time, but believe me, I am not camera ready right now. So I look forward to seeing you all next week in our business meeting. And I appreciate everything that you all have done to accommodate my absence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha. Again, it was so good to have you back, and I'm happy to do what I need to do to support your absence and encourage you to come back whenever you're ready. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next Tuesday. Bye.
Thank you.